All right, let's get right into it. When generative AI just exploded onto the scene, it really felt like we were on the brink of a revolution, you know? The big promise was this future where the whole playing field of knowledge and skill was finally going to be completely level. But is that what's actually happening? Let's take a much closer look. This was the idea that just caught fire. It's such a powerful metaphor, right? AI is this massive flood, just wiping the slate clean. The idea was that all the old hierarchies, all those advantages that only a few people had, were about to get washed away for good. I mean, what an exciting thought.
And you can see why this was so convincing, because the promise felt so real, so immediate. All of a sudden, skills that used to take years and years to get good at, like writing really well, or creating amazing art, or even coding, were suddenly available to pretty much anyone. The barriers to entry? Poof, they just seemed to vanish into thin air.
So the logical next step in that thinking was pretty simple. If everybody has access to these incredible skills, then the power that used to come with them must get spread out, right? That gap between the so-called educated and less educated, well, it was supposed to just shrink away. Power wouldn't be concentrated anymore. It would be completely flattened. And this is what made the dream feel so tangible. It wasn't just some abstract theory. It had real-world, practical uses for everyday people. Think about it. A night shift worker could suddenly whip up a CV that looks like a pro wrote it. A mom at home could create a script for a podcast. A student, way out in a rural town, could get a super complex textbook idea explained in a way they actually get. It honestly felt like democratization in action.
And here's the turn. Because on the surface, everything we've just talked about, it's true. The tools are real, the stuff they make is impressive. But this is exactly where we have to be careful. There's a huge trap here in thinking that what we see on the surface is the whole story. It's not.
So this is where we have to start digging a little deeper and asking some tougher questions. I mean, if perfect smooth writing is now the new baseline for everybody, then what's actually going to make one person's work stand out from another's? What becomes the new way we measure value when the old way is just a given?
And it goes further. Let's say anyone can create a gorgeous design or a slick website with a simple command. Okay, great. But who has the vision to direct it? Who has that critical eye, that strategic mind, to know if that beautiful thing the AI made is actually the right thing for the problem you're trying to solve? Which kind of leads us to the biggest, most crucial question of all. Are we using these incredible new tools to come up with truly groundbreaking, deep ideas? Or are we just getting really, really fast at churning out endless, slightly different versions of the same old stuff? Is it real innovation, or is it just infinite remixing?
And this, right here, is the absolute heart of the matter. The whole idea that AI is this great equalizer, it makes one huge fundamental mistake. It assumes the hard part was always the execution, the skill of the hands. But it completely misses where the real power has always been. It's never been in the hands. It's always been in the head. So what does that really mean? It means GenAI isn't destroying privilege at all. Nope, it's just changing its address. The power didn't just disappear. It just moved from the very visible world of tangible skills to the invisible world of how we think. And that makes it so much harder to even see. Let's break that down side by side. The old power was the stuff you could see, right? A fancy degree on the wall, a big job title, the ability to write a perfect sentence. That was visible. But the new power? It's invisible. It's the quality of the mental models you use, the insight behind the questions you ask the AI, and most importantly, your gut ability to judge if the answers you get back are any good.
In other words, advantage isn't something you can just list on a resume anymore. It's retreated inward. It's gone deeper into these layers that are really hard to measure. It's about how you think, how you frame a problem, and the way you see the world. And that's a lot harder to show off. And for a lot of people, it's a lot harder to learn.
So let's go all the way back to that flood metaphor we started with. It turns out the flood doesn't actually wash away those old structures of power. It does something else, something way more subtle.
It just lifts the highest mountain peaks even higher. So instead of leveling the whole landscape, it actually creates a new, more elevated high ground of cognitive privilege. A peak that's so high, a lot of people down below might not even realize it's there, let alone figure out how to start climbing it.
And that leaves us with one final, really big thought. If the new markers of success and advantage are basically invisible and the gap is actually getting wider in secret, well, maybe the most important skill isn't just using AI. Maybe it's learning how to recognize these new, invisible peaks of power. So, the question for all of us is, how do we even start to look for them?
All right, in this explainer, we're diving into something really interesting, something kind of paradoxical. We have these incredible new tools that promise us perfect expression, but they might actually be showing us what it really means to have something to say in the first place. Let's get into it.
Just let that sink in for a second. Imagine no more fumbling around for the right word, no more struggling to make your hand draw what's so clear in your head. Every single idea communicated instantly and flawlessly. What would that world even be like?
Okay, so before we can really get where we're going, we have to look back. We need to understand the problem we've been trying to solve for, well, forever. It's what we're going to call the expression barrier. You know this feeling, right? It's that huge, frustrating gap between the rich, complex world inside your mind and what you can actually manage to put down on a page or on a canvas. It's always been this massive challenge. I mean, we've all been there. You've got this brilliant concept for something, but you just can't find the words. Or you can see the perfect logo in your mind's eye, but you can't even draw a stick figure. You feel this powerful story inside you, but it just comes out as a jumbled mess. That was the bottleneck. And because of that, a kind of hierarchy was created. The ability to write well, or speak well, or draw well, it wasn't just a skill. It was a form of privilege. It gave the people who had it a huge leg up, while a lot of brilliant thinkers got left behind simply because they couldn't get their ideas out. But then, something came along that seemed like it was going to change the entire game, a tool that promised to level that playing field for good. And just like that, generative AI shows up, and that age-old barrier, it just seemed to dissolve. I mean, the bottleneck that had defined human communication for centuries was basically shattered in a matter of months. It was wild. For writing, these tools are astonishing. They can take your clunky sentences and make them sing. They can outline entire articles for you. They can even copy the style of your favorite author with, frankly, disturbing accuracy. The friction of writing is just gone. And it's the exact same story with images. You can type a simple phrase and get back a beautiful illustration. You can generate a professional-looking poster or a book cover in the time it takes to brew a cup of coffee. So, the first takeaway seems like a no-brainer, right? This is it, the great equalizer. Now anyone, no matter their training, can create polished, professional-level work. Expression has been democratized. Or has it? This is where the whole story gets a lot more complicated. Because when you start to peel back that first layer of smooth AI-generated perfection, you find something totally different underneath. Let's talk about the mouth versus the gut. And here is the big twist. AI might have solved the problem of how to say something, but it can't solve the most fundamental problem of all, having something meaningful to say in the first place. That old bottleneck didn't actually disappear. It's just become way, way clearer. This quote just nails it. An AI is a pattern-matching machine. It can remix and reassemble everything it's ever been trained on with incredible skill, but it has no lived experience. It doesn't reside inside the words and images it creates. An AI has never felt the sting of a career falling apart, or the quiet, deep pride of paying a bill for someone you love. It has never known heartbreak or real regret, or the specific, fuzzy texture of a cherished memory. These are the things that give human expression its weight. So this brings us to the core distinction. AI has mastered the mouth. It knows the grammar of experience. It knows the right words to use, the correct structure. But it completely, totally lacks the gut, the actual substance, the emotional truth, the weight of having lived through something. So here's the bottom line. When we rely entirely on a tool that only has a mouth, we get output that looks perfect on the surface, but feels hollow. It's articulate, but it's empty. It's smooth text with no soul. And this distinction, it creates two very different outcomes for the people using these tools. Instead of making everything equal, AI is actually creating a new kind of hierarchy. It really leads to two completely different paths. If you have a core, deep experience, a unique point of view, something real to say, AI becomes an incredible amplifier. It helps you get your ideas out into the world faster and more clearly. But if you don't have that core, AI becomes a ceiling. It gives you a polished surface, but it can't help you build any substance underneath. So in the short term, yeah, it feels like equality. Everyone's work suddenly looks professional. But over the long term, a new divide becomes painfully obvious. The gap between those using AI to amplify real substance and those just using it to create a hollow, professional-looking shell.
And this brings us to our final and maybe most important point. What happens to privilege in a world where anyone can sound like an expert? Look, AI has equalized the mouth. Anyone can now have perfect word choice, slick formatting, and mimic any style they want. But it cannot equalize the gut. It can't give you unique perspectives, it can't give you the weight of lived experience, and it sure can't give you the density of thought that comes from years of struggle and real learning. That part remains deeply unequal.
In this is the profound takeaway. Privilege didn't just vanish, it just moved. It retreated from that visible layer of polished expression, and it took refuge where AI can't follow, in the messy, difficult, and incredibly valuable work of simply being human.
So we'll end with a question for you. As the tools for expression become effortless, become perfect, the real differentiator becomes what you have to express in the first place. The most important question is no longer, how do I say it, but what do I have to say? In a world of perfect mouths, what's in your gut? Specifically, how it's completely changing our relationship with knowledge. On one hand, it feels like this amazing new superpower, right? But on the other, could it also be rewiring the way our brains actually work? That's what we're going to unpack. You know, the big promise of AI, the sales pitch, has always been incredibly optimistic. The whole idea was that knowledge shouldn't be locked away in some university library or hidden behind an expensive paywall. Nope, it should be for everyone. Anything you could possibly want to know, boom, it's right there at your fingertips. And look, this isn't some sci-fi future we're talking about. It's happening right now. A high school student can ask about one of the most ridiculously complex ideas in all of math and get an explanation with simple metaphors. I mean, it's like the velvet rope to the VIP section of knowledge has just been torn down completely. So this brings us to what we're calling the knowledge flood. And before we get into the downsides, let's just appreciate the sheer scale of this change. AI didn't just open a door, it's like a dam burst, and a torrent of information is now flowing everywhere. I mean, really think about it. You can take some super dense, impossible to read definition from a physics textbook, something like the Maxwell stress tensor, and just paste it into a chat window. And in seconds, you get back an explanation that is often way clearer than the book you paid $100 for. That's an incredibly powerful tool. So, on the surface, this picture looks perfect, doesn't it? It really feels like a genuine democratization of knowledge. People who felt like they were on the outside can now just ask. You don't need a PhD anymore to get the basic gist of a complex topic. And that old divide between the haves and have-nots of information, well, it feels like it's finally starting to close. But you knew there was a but coming, right? Because underneath this shiny, perfect picture, a much more complicated reality is starting to show. And that brings us to a really crucial distinction we have to make. The difference between just having access to information and having genuine understanding. This is the big question we've got to ask. We have more information than at any point in human history, but are we actually understanding things any more deeply? Or are we just getting really good at skimming across a much wider but much shallower ocean of facts? Let's really drill down here. When you get that perfect, beautiful explanation with a single click, does it actually sharpen your mind and make you better at asking questions? Or does it just give you that quick, satisfying rush, that feeling of understanding that actually stops you from digging any deeper? To really get to the bottom of this, we need to talk about what's happening right up here, in our own heads. And that leads us to a fascinating concept from cognitive science, the offloading brain. Yep. Scientists who study how we think have a very specific name for what we're doing when we rely on external tools to do our mental heavy lifting for us. And that term is cognitive offloading. Now, it sounds all technical, but the definition is surprisingly simple. It's just using an external tool to reduce the load on your brain. And while it might sound like some new scary thing, it's really not. In fact, we've been doing it forever. Writing things down so you don't have to remember them, that's offloading. Using a calendar to keep track of birthdays, offloading. Relying on GPS to get you to a new restaurant? That is classic cognitive offloading. Asking AI is just the latest, most powerful version of a really old human habit. But this is where things get critical, because it turns out that not all offloading is created equal. There's a fundamental difference between using these tools to make us smarter and using them in a way that just might be making us a bit more passive. And this is the distinction that really matters. Let's call it smart offloading versus stupid offloading. Smart offloading is strategic.
You move the trivial stuff outward, like memorizing phone numbers, to free up your brain for the hard, creative questions. Stupid offloading is the opposite. It's when you outsource the hard questions themselves, the very act of thinking, of questioning, of judging. And this isn't just a theory. A study in the journal Societies found a direct link. The more people got into the habit of letting AI think for them, the lower their scores were on critical thinking tests. The tool basically becomes a crutch. So this creates what you could call the cycle of stupid offloading. It starts when you don't understand something, so you ask AI. Then the AI gives you this smooth, perfect answer, and you get that aha feeling of instant understanding. The problem is that feeling can be a trap. It's so satisfying that you just stop right there. You never try to rephrase it or apply it or really struggle to make that knowledge your own. And this quote just nails it. A tool only helps you think when you stay in the driver's seat, when you remain active, when you're still forming your own ideas, still testing things out, and maybe most importantly, still doubting the answers you get. You have to be an active participant. So what's the big picture here? Well, this all brings us to our final and maybe most important section, the new divide. Because how we choose to use these tools isn't just a personal choice. It has massive consequences for all of us. Here's the bottom line. AI is fantastic at giving us access to answers. It can summarize a dense research paper in seconds. But what it can't do is give you the truly rare skill, the ability to ask a good question in the first place. It can't build a real framework for understanding inside your head. That part is still our job. And because of that, a new, invisible gap is widening in our society. It's no longer about who has access to information. The new divide is between people who passively collect answers from AI and those who actively use it as a tool to help them search for better, deeper questions. This leads to a really powerful conclusion. As one writer put it, real privilege has never disappeared. It has merely retreated into the shadow of the command prompt. Just think about that. It suggests that the real advantage in the world today is no longer about old forms of status. It's hidden in the skill of knowing how to prompt, how to question, and how to effectively have a dialogue with these powerful systems. Which brings everything right back to you and the choice you make every single time you engage with this technology. So that's the question I want to leave you with. In this new world, are you using AI to just become a collector of answers? Or are you using it to develop the much more valuable skill of learning how to ask the right questions? The choice is yours. Thanks for tuning in.